In a few weeks' time, we have Mental Health Awareness Week, and we thought this would be a great opportunity to have a bit of discussion about anxiety, because that is the theme of this week for 2023. And obviously, being a talent solution company, anxiety isn't something uncommon that we experience, whether it's taking a new job or settling in or, not feeling your best self in your current role. So I am sat down with the wonderful Natalia today to tell me a little bit about what she experiences with her candidates when she's going out to find people to fit her roles, but then also people that come to her looking for their next opportunity. Natalia, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
No worries, no, it's glad to be here, glad to be talking about Mental Health Awareness Week. I think it's something that sits with me. So yeah, glad to be having this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. And let's start out with talking about what it actually is is it common, I guess, is one of the words, because we do hear in 2023, we hear so much more about anxiety. We hear about far more conditions than ever before, which I personally think is a fantastic thing. But in terms of reality day to day, when it comes to finding a new job and the anxieties that are surrounding all of that process, is it quite a common thing that you do experience?
I think for myself, yes, and dealing with candidates every day, it's scary. It's new for them, and I think it's me. Of course, it's exciting, but for those candidates that have been in a job for it could be 10 plus years, they're starting afresh again, and it's there's so much to think about. There's you're starting with a new team. You could be leading a team. You're going to wonder, am I going to get on with these people? Am I going to do well? Am I just getting this job because of luck? There's so many factors to it, and when starting that role as well, if you're the first few months are always going to be challenging. Always, like I found it myself, and you're settling into a new environment, and it's hard, and there's things that you need to like overcome in those few months, and sometimes it's you just got to work with your brain a little bit.
Mm.
But yeah, I think it's difficult for everyone. It's difficult for everyone. There are those few people that ride on through, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's a hard one. It's a hard one.
And I think it's for me, I think it's very similar to how we see social media, right? Where we see people, crushing it, they're living their best lives, but we know that's the highlight reel. And I think
Mhm.
this conversation is really important to say that actually on some level, people do experience these anxieties and they manifest in different ways. Now, like everything, that could be, a little bit on the scale, or it could be, really, really deeply working through some things. And I think it's interesting how you phrase it, of kind of working with your brain, because I think that's
Yeah.
that's such a great way of but a lot of these things are internal. It might not be that the external environment is making you feel a certain way, but obviously that can be, you can walk into a new job and the culture is different and you've got to kind of liaise with that. Even if the culture is fantastic, your boss is brilliant, your team are awesome, that doesn't stop you still having these internal anxieties about, are you enough? And you mentioned actually about the luck element, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome as well, because that's a key theme of especially if you get a promotion, because again, it could be internal. It doesn't have to be that you're
Mm.
externally going out to another company. It could be you've got a promotion as well, and that finds you in a new world. But I think when it comes to anxiety, it can be difficult sometimes to name the beast. We talk about it in very generalized terms. So, in your experience, how does it tend to manifest in candidates that you see? Is it a case of perhaps overworking so that they can kind of prove themselves, or increase stress levels? What are you seeing?
I think it might be a little bit difficult to talk about candidates because once they've started the job, we have that interaction with them for the first couple of months just to see how they're
Mm.
getting on, which is really good. And you know what, 9 times out of 10, great, which knows that we're doing a good job as well. So, but I think if I'm going to talk about this, it's probably more on a personal level than anything. So I think when you start to get, you know, those anxious thoughts and that starts to build up, it can really lead to really kind of escaping a little bit. And sometimes you can either, yes, people can overwork and, you know, the results don't come through because
Hmm.
your head's not actually in it. You're just working and working and working, trying and trying. But sometimes it can be more like, okay, so this is going badly, like one thing after the other. I'm not fitting in here. You know, as a recruiter, no money is coming through. Am I actually just bad at my job? Like that's and when I go back to working with your brain again, that's something that you need to really try and you need to stay, especially in recruitment, you really need to stay positive, and that's something, it's always peaks and troughs.
And,
So,
I want to pick up on something you said there about, results aren't coming in. And I think in your previous role, because you've done all the legwork, you're used to, deals coming in every week or you're meeting your targets every week. But when you move into that new role, you don't have that legacy. So you've got to start from scratch. There's a lot of groundwork to be doing. And I think that in itself is quite intimidating to when you are used to on a Friday call, getting on and talking about your successes in the first couple weeks, couple months even, you might not have a lot to shout about, which could be very, very different to what you are used to doing, which is every Friday you say, I've hit my goals. In fact, I've, overachieved, etc. And that can be really, really difficult.
yeah, no, 100%, 100%. It's yeah, it's difficult at times, it can be. But I think there is ways that, you know, you can help with that anxiety.
Mm.
And that it can be either whilst you're in a job or starting a new job. There is loads of different ways that, you know, that you can focus on, and it really does help.
Yeah, well, let's dive into some of those ways. Are there any particular tips or techniques that you've seen people use that you've thought, that looks like a really healthy way of dealing with it, or even, if you're happy to share for yourself what you've done in those scenarios?
Yeah, well, I think there's the main ones that everybody knows, you know, getting your 8 hours of sleep every night, you know, eating a lot healthier, being able to, like a lot of other businesses now, well, from what I'm seeing, you can have a longer break to go to the gym. And sometimes that is what's needed. You just need to get out of the office for an hour or so, maybe go for a walk, do a bit of exercise. That really just clears the mind
Mm.
and you come back and you're refreshed. But I think one thing that I found whenever I've gone through that is probably speaking to my friends, my family, um, open up, don't just shut away and just
Mm.
get in your own thoughts. And probably, you know what, ask for those conversations with your line manager. Work out where you need to improve, work out, you know, where what you're doing well in as well. Really focus on what you're doing well and don't focus on, you know, don't always focus on your mistakes and what you can't
Yeah.
do. Focus on what you can do. And that's something that is really important, which in whatever career you're in.
Yeah, yeah, and by the time this actually airs, I would have been with Orbition Group for 3 months. So I can bring kind of a very fresh perspective to this discussion. And I think just to add what you said there about not focusing on the negatives, I think there's also that importance to give yourself grace as well, to know that you're not perfect. You're not going to get it right every single time, first time around. There's going to be some growth, there's going to be some learning. Let's be honest, if we were, amazingly perfect all the time, wouldn't life be boring? But again, it can be really difficult when you go from, for my own personal circumstance, I was in my previous role for 4.5 years. I've got a bit of legacy there, but if I get something slightly wrong, people trust that, it was in good nature, it's in, development. Whereas when you do step into a new role, it is a case of, oh, can she do the job? There is that anxiety there as well. So yeah, I think giving yourself grace when things don't perhaps go quite to plan first
Yeah.
time around, and just understanding that it is a journey. And I think, as you say, also knowing your avenues internally and externally of what to do when things aren't going quite to plan. So whether that is, sitting down with HR and talking about, team management, like you say, if you've walked into a new role and you're managing a new team, is there some sort of learning opportunity there with your own management skills?
Yeah.
And also externally, whether you need to access some talking or walk through, because there's so many professionals that deal with exactly what we're talking about as well. And certainly no harm in accessing those at the time of stress as well. Now, we've spoken about the candidate. What about the companies? Because obviously you go inside so many different organizations of all shapes and sizes. Do you have any particular stories of where people have set their new starters up for really good success, where they've, acknowledged that these anxieties will be going on and trying to reduce them for them?
Yeah, so I don't think I've got any stories, but from what I've seen, there's a lot of things that people, different organizations are doing now, to help with, well-being, anxiety, etc. Like, so there's the likes of, a company that we're working with that, have unlimited annual leave just to help, like, with, and they've seen over the last 3 years the well-being of their staff has really improved, and I'm sure that's going to help with anxiety as well. Because when people are starting to feel, a little bit, they've had a really good few months and they're feeling a little bit now, they just need a little bit of time to just refresh. I think that is very key. I think I've also seen as well, different organizations doing workshops as well, on how to look after yourself.
Mm,
And I think as well, something that, now this could be debated, but I think since COVID, there's this hybrid working pattern that's been brought into place, remote working. And, I find from a lot of people that I speak to that they prefer that way of working.
mm,
And that's because, they can do their personal things as well, over their lunch break. And when they finish, it's easier than having to commute. And that definitely reduces a lot of anxiety. When, you've got, like, you can be at home, when you've got things going on in your personal life as well.
mm.
It's just, the two kind of, I feel like I'm rambling here.
No, no, I know exactly what you mean. I know, no, you're not rambling at all. I know exactly what you mean, where you're treating people holistically, right? You're not,
Yeah,
but and I think, as you're right, the pandemic did a fantastic job of not saying, here's Natalia the professional, here's Natalia the friend, the daughter, this is, whatever. It is actually saying, we no, you're a whole person, and guess what? On a Thursday, you might need to stay at home because whatever reason. And that's not taking away from you as a professional, because you're still going to work. You're
yeah.
probably going to actually work more hours, as we know,
Hmm.
and be even more productive. But as we said, something that we published a few weeks ago is we know that most organizations are looking at this kind of hybrid model, which is kind of the best of both worlds, because obviously the flip side of the coin is that some people, if they are remote working, when they start a new job, they can feel quite isolated from their team. They can feel it difficult to kind of mesh with people. So this kind of hybrid version is kind of the best of both worlds, and especially for organizations that let you choose which days you go into the office as well,
Yeah.
really, really kind of top tier. And something else I want to mention about your story about the client we have working with us who has unlimited annual leave. I think it's so crucial that leaders set an example. I think it's really hard for you as an employee to take time off if your boss, if your leader, if your CEO is constantly working, constantly available. I think it sets the tone of an organization. And I'm going to call out Kyle here. A few weeks ago, he took Friday afternoon off because it was his son's birthday and he wanted to go spend time. I mean, what a fantastic example of saying, right now, you know what, family's priority right now. I know that you guys are going to get on with your work and whatever else you need to do. And there's that trust there as well, which is, again,
Yeah.
important to that anxiety piece, that, you are trusted to do your work. But again, an example of a leader who's going out and living their values, so that when I want to take an afternoon off to spend with my family, I don't feel that there's some sort of expectation to catch up
Yeah.
as well, which is really, really very important. Um, we've covered a lot. I think there's definitely a story here that it's not uncommon, and that it's certainly usual for you to go through these feelings. What are your kind of final thoughts on this, Natalia, as we wrap up here today?
I think, um, and it's probably going to be really common what I'm about to say, and we hear this all the time, but I just think if you're going into a new job, if you're in a job at the minute and you're feeling the pressure, you're feeling that anxiety, just talk to someone. Like that's the main thing. That's what's worked for me over the years. And that's what's going to really help you get to, that point where you're going to be fine and you're going to be successful. And I think as well, just always focus on what you can do. Don't focus on your mistakes. Just try and learn from your mistakes. And there's people to help you around that can do that as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and look forward to publishing this in a couple of weeks' time for Mental Health Awareness
Yeah,
Week. Thank you so much.
thank you.